Robert Reynolds' original miniseries was actually The Sentry, created by Paul Jenkins and Jay Lee, part of the Marvel Knights line. It was a standalone story, separate from the main Marvel universe, though still largely set within that world. Marvel was in financial trouble in the 1990 seconds. Characters like Avi Arad, Ike Perlmutter, and the Marvel executive team emerged, leading to the hiring of Joe Quesada. Quesada later became editor-in-chief, in part because of his connections to Jimmy Palmiotti and his own company, Event Comics. This company played a key role in allowing Marvel to work flexibly with top artists and creators. The goal was to focus resources on characters with high commercial appeal, rather than spreading efforts on characters with less potential in a market downturn. The result of this strategy was the birth of Marvel Knights, a series that focused on depth of content, unique art style, and higher quality storytelling. Under Quesada's direction, Marvel Knights not only revived familiar icons, but also created vibrant new storylines. Among them, The Sentry stood out as a bold effort, telling a story about a hero with original power, representing the innovative spirit of Marvel in the rebirth period. This was not only a story about power, but also a symbol of the creative reconstruction of an entire era of comics. In essence, Sentry was the inspiration for Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four, and also a close friend of the Incredible Hulk. However, in the story, a dark force called the Void suddenly appeared and began to sow destruction everywhere. It wasn't until the story reached its climax that readers realized the shocking truth. Void and Sentry were actually one, with Void being Sentry's dark self. The confrontation between the good and evil sides of the same person led to a tragic end, when Sentry was forced to erase his own existence from the memories of all humanity to prevent the disaster caused by Void. When Marvel decided to bring Sentry back to the main story, the question was whether they would keep this storyline. In theory, it was completely possible, but Brian Michael Bendis, who took on the rewrite, chose a different direction. The new version of Sentry was introduced in New Avengers, opening a tumultuous period in the Marvel Universe. Under Joe Quesada's strategic vision, the entire Marvel world entered a period of strong restructuring. Within 3 years, a series of major events broke out, such as Avengers, Disassembled, House of M, and Civil War. These events not only reshaped the landscape of heroes, but also paved the way for the rebirth of the Avengers in a new chapter, with a more dramatic, darker, and deeper spirit than ever before. The difference this time around is that Marvel introduced a completely new lineup, updated with the participation of top heroes such as Spider-Woman, Captain America, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Wolverine, and later Sentry. The plot is built in such a way that readers do not need to understand Sentry's past to fully follow the story. However, for those familiar with the original Sentry story, this is an impressive return, reminiscent of one of the most beloved comic works of all time, where the writing, structure, and psychological depth of the character make the reader strongly captivated. The story begins in Nevada, a continuation of the first New Avengers story. The story opens with a story called Breakout, in which Electro is hired to infiltrate the Raft, a maximum security prison that holds the most dangerous supervillains. He disables the entire electrical system, allowing a series of notorious enemies to escape, leading to a series of violent chaos. In the midst of that chaos, Sentry suddenly appears. Without any introduction, without any long preamble, he rushes in, grabs Carnage, flies straight into space, and tears him in half. Then, Sentry quietly disappears, leaving a shocking and meaningful moment. The scene not only showcased his terrifying power, but also served as a silent declaration from Marvel that a new superhero force was returning, kicking off a journey to uncover the mystery that lies deep within Sentry's mind and what's really going on with him. The Avengers focused on understanding Sentry's true self, trying to discover who he is and where his mysterious powers come from. It was a fascinating psychological journey, as the Avengers were dealing not just with a man with extraordinary powers, but also with a troubled mind. To find answers, they decided to bring in Sentry's wife, Lindy, to help unravel the truth. Lindy was a key character from the original short story, where it was revealed that Robert Reynolds, Sentry's true identity, may have been suffering from severe schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder. He had multiple identities within his mind: Robert Reynolds, Sentry, and Void. He lives in a state of tension between reality and fantasy, unable to distinguish what is real and what is a figment of the imagination. When the Avengers sit down to try to understand him, they not only talk to Lindy, but also to Paul Jenkins, who is known as the man who wrote the comics about Sentry. The way Brian Michael Bendis weaves this detail is extremely unique, because he makes Jenkins, the real-life author of Sentry, a part of the plot itself. In this way, Jenkins is portrayed as the man who created Sentry from nothing, blurring the line between the real world and the comic world. This subtle blend highlights the central theme of the story: who is really real, and what is a figment of Sentry's chaotic mind. The idea surrounding Robert Reynolds creates a thick layer of mystery, because no one really knows who he is or where he came from. People just know that he exists, inexplicably. This leads to the strange theory that the characters created by Paul Jenkins in the comics seem to have stepped off the page and come to life in the Marvel Universe, where they wander and interact with the real world, a phenomenon that should not exist. From here, the story gradually shifts when Sentry begins to fall into a state of panic. He screams in fear, warning that the Void is coming, that everyone will be destroyed. The disorder causes him to lose control, flying through the air, leaving everyone in shock. Then the story returns to Robert Reynolds, sitting alone in a quiet house. This image strongly recalls the early chapters of the original short story series, where Robert is portrayed as a loner, living in the darkness of fear. In the past, he often heard the Void whispering in his mind, cold voices ringing in his head, talking about death, about the destruction of humanity, about the day of its return. In a fit of paranoia, Robert mistook his dog for Void, spoke to it as an enemy, and then took action, scaring his wife Lindy into leaving him, unable to bear his husband's demise. These images reveal a world where reality and fantasy are intertwined, where the line between humanity and madness becomes blurred, and the reader can only wonder, what is real, and what is really going on in Sentry's mind? Is what is happening real, or just an illusion? That question covers the entire story, making it impossible for readers to distinguish what is true and what is a lie. It is in that moment that Robert Reynolds faces the spiritual projection of Emma Frost, and this is when things start to get darker than ever. In the world of Marvel superheroes, SHIELD is considered a global surveillance shield, monitoring all changes on Earth. However, the existence of Sentry has thrown that system into chaos. He is being held at the raft, but no one knows who he is, no one understands how he got there, and no data records his existence. When SHIELD discovering the terrifying power he possesses, fear quickly spread as the biggest question was, how could someone with such power be erased from all human memories and records? To find the answer, the new Avengers were summoned, gathering the top faces in the superhero community. They were not only members of the Avengers, but also included some X-Men, along with SHIELD, forces, and even Inhumans. This entire group joined forces to uncover the dark mystery surrounding Sentry, a mystery that could completely change their perception of reality, and even of themselves. The appearance of Doctor Strange and a series of top heroes made the scene solemn and weighty, all present, clearly showing that this was no trivial incident. This was a direct manifestation of Sentry's power, a power that far exceeded any standards they had ever faced. If this were just a normal situation, perhaps Captain America and Iron Man would have just come to Robert Reynolds, sit down for coffee and have a friendly chat. But this time, not only them, but also the strongest pillars of the superhero community gathered. They understood that what was happening was beyond human control, and they needed to find out the truth before it was too late. The atmosphere quickly became tense as Robert Reynolds began to panic. He shouted, warning that the Void had arrived, that everything was wrong and no one could escape fate. In that moment, the Void truly appeared. A giant entity covered in black energy filled the sky, exuding a sense of absolute doom. He didn't need to say much, just his presence was enough to make space shake and the earth tremble. This was the original image of the Void that fans wanted, a symbol of absolute destruction, with an almost divine form but surrounded by darkness. He exists as an infinite force, a source of energy that even the most powerful can only fear. While Marvel has repeatedly failed to fully exploit his potential, this moment clearly shows the true nature of the Void. A living, indestructible nightmare, and the embodiment of boundless destruction. The omnipotent and immortal entity appeared in the fantasy story we created during the Siege event. When Norman Osborn seized the shield, he launched a full-scale attack on Asgard. In that battle, the Void, a source of boundless power, nearly destroyed all living things there. It then left Earth, plunging into deep space, carrying with it a thirst for destruction to destroy all other forms of existence. The power it displayed was beyond all normal limits. It is difficult to compare a character from one universe with a character from another, because the rules and nature of energy in each world are not completely similar. However, the undeniable truth is that the power still follows the logic that the reader can predict. It comes from the center of the whole event, Robert Reynolds. In the next development, Reed Richards and Emma Frost appear together. A multi-dimensional energy source is created, forming a protective force field around the three people. Doctor Strange uses magic to strengthen the barrier, Iron Man radiates energy from his armor, while Susan Storm uses her force field to increase stability. However, all these efforts are only temporary. The infinite energy of the void soon overwhelms all their strength, making all their defenses useless. In the end, all are just people picked in an unequal fight, like fish in a barrel, where the void easily destroys them one by one. In the last moment of hope, Reed Richards activates a recording stored by Robert Reynolds himself. It is a video message sent to the future, where he explains the whole nature of what is happening. It is at this moment that the plot becomes complicated and controversial. For loyal fans of the original series, this development leaves many doubts and indescribable emotions. It opens up a deep philosophical layer about power and existence and makes the reader wonder, can humans truly understand the nature of an omnipotent entity, or is it all just an illusion before the wrath of nothingness? The last thing that happens is that Centurion sits down, quietly admitting that he doesn't really understand what's going on. For brief moments, he can feel a bit of clarity, as if his memories and ego suddenly return. But then, in just a split second, everything disappears like smoke. He loses his awareness of himself, doesn't know his past, doesn't remember his origins, and doesn't understand why he possesses such extraordinary power. His existence at this moment is just like a broken mirror, reflecting fragments of memories that can't be put together into a complete form. Centurion became the image of a hero lost in his own mind, a man who still walks, still speaks, but no longer holds the soul of the past. In the original Marvel Knights version, the story revealed that the whole truth about Centurion was the result of a device created by Reed Richards and Doctor Strange. This device emitted continuous energy pulses, capable of hiding his memory from the world, erasing all traces of his true existence in the human mind. So, no one remembered him. The story of Centurion disappeared, buried in the mists of time and magic. Some people think that bringing this detail back is too far-fetched, but in the world of comics where the absurd becomes reasonable, nothing is impossible. Because in the fragile boundary between reality and fantasy, sometimes oblivion is the most terrifying source of power. In fact, this development becomes extremely interesting when Centurion realizes something important. If the video he is watching was recorded by himself in the past, then there must be some truth in it. Although the logic is somewhat vague, this detail creates an interesting twist for the story, forcing the viewer to accept and continue. Because we are talking about a person with multiple personality disorder and a split mind, so believing in his own recording is inherently illogical. But that is the key to the story's continuation. From here, Emma Frost steps into the center of the story. She uses her telepathic ability to penetrate Robert Reynolds' mind, starting to scan through layers of memories that have been covered for many years. Deep in that consciousness, they discover that Robert seems to have existed for a long time, as if he is an immutable part of superhero history. While Venus maintains the idea that Robert is the original hero, the biggest question remains why no one remembers him, why he can't remember himself, and what caused all of that to be erased from reality. Because the so-called neural inhibitor, a special form of energy once created by Centurion and Reed Richards, was no longer present, the question became deeper. What replaced it? What caused Robert Reynolds' memories, identity, and soul to become so distorted? It was at this moment that Emma Frost began to delve deeper into his mind, where darkness and light intertwined, revealing fragments of a terrifying secret that was about to be exposed. Emma Frost continued to delve deeper into Robert Reynolds' mind, and then she discovered something strange. In his memory, there was a sealed gap, as if there was a black box hidden inside. Behind that barrier were locked memories, containing the truth that Robert was not allowed to remember. As the mind's veil gradually opened, they realized that Robert's entire consciousness had been tampered with, and the one behind this was Jason Wingard, also known as Mastermind. Bendis has shown great sophistication in using this character in the story. Jason Wingard possesses the ability to manipulate the 5 senses, can completely control what others see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. With that power, he erased all of Robert Reynolds' memories, causing him to completely lose his sense of self. However, Wingard's true motives were not based on personal will. He acted under the direction of another force, one that has not been revealed, making everything dark and mysterious. The big question is, why did all this happen, and who is behind this terrible cover-up? As the truth gradually emerged, Robert Reynolds began to panic. He was forced to face the painful memories that he had buried deep in his subconscious. In that chaos, the story shifted to another perspective of Paul Jenkins. It was when Robert tried to send out a desperate cry for help that he unconsciously transferred a part of himself into Paul Jenkins's mind. As Paul struggled to find inspiration to write a story, a voice in his subconscious, Robert Reynolds, whispered, "Write about me." Without realizing what was happening, Paul began to write, and the story of Centurion was born not only as a work of fiction, but also as an unconscious reflection of a hidden reality. Robert Reynolds planted his entire train of thought and memory into Paul Jenkins's mind. From there, Paul wrote the story of this century without knowing that he was recording a hidden truth in his own mind. Although this is a rather complicated and seemingly unnecessary explanation, the way Bendis develops this character makes sense in the story, because it clearly reflects the chaotic and elusive nature of Robert Reynolds. However, the strange thing is that no one really understands him. No one can grasp the person hidden behind that fragile psychological shell. When the situation becomes serious, Emma Frost decides to take action. She goes to Lindy, Robert's wife, and uses her psychic powers to connect their minds. Her purpose is clear: to create a shared memory, an emotional fulcrum that can pull Robert back to reality. Emma understands that if she doesn't do so, the unstable power within him can destroy everything. The atmosphere at that time becomes tense. Everyone seems to be racing against time. Emma transfers Lindy's images and emotions into Robert's mind. Their first date, their first kiss, and the moment their love truly begins. Those memories help Robert gradually regain consciousness. His eyes become less chaotic, his breathing becomes more stable. As the psychic connection ended, Emma reached deeper into his mind and said, "We know who you are. We will find out the truth about you, your origins, and the power you hold." She confirmed that they knew about the energy formula that had transformed Robert's body, causing his molecules to move a moment faster than the real time. It was this that made him something beyond the laws of the world, both human and an endless source of life energy. Emma Frost looked straight at Robert Reynolds, her voice ringing in the silence, both firm and commanding. She said he possessed the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns, a power beyond all human understanding. His origin story was intact, but now they needed to find out 3 things. Who Jason Wingard served, what was the real reason behind the manipulated memories, and finally, what path Robert would choose after all that had happened. Emma continued that he had terrible power, an astronomical power that could shape the world. She advised him to use it to become part of the superhero community, to protect rather than destroy. And so, Robert Reynolds was invited to join the new Avengers. If you put yourself in the shoes of those who lived in that universe, you can understand the reason for this decision. Perhaps they believed it was better to keep Robert in check than to let him lose his mind and turn into a void. Because if that happened, a catastrophe could wipe out a large area in the blink of an eye. From here, Emma Frost began to dig deeper into his mind, leading him to see the truth. She told him that the void was not an external entity, nor was it some separate personality. It was a part of him, a darkness that was tied to his very nature. If he learned to control it, he could prevent destruction and live in harmony with himself. Marvel left that message as a hidden warning. Robert Reynolds, aka Sentry, now became an official member of the Avengers. However, his presence in later comics gradually faded. Despite being a character of rare depth, both a symbol of infinite power and a metaphor for the torn mind, Sentry has been relegated to a supporting role, appearing only occasionally for a few brilliant moments before disappearing. Ultimately, he remains an unfinished story in the Marvel Universe, a symbol of tragedy and irreconcilable power, a once bright but forgotten ray of light among thousands of other legends.